Photoshop is insanely expensive. In fact, if you have the Adobe All Apps plan, you're paying roughly $55 a month to use Photoshop and other Adobe programs. That's almost $700 per year. Now, what if I were to tell you there is a tool that does everything that you can do in Photoshop, but is completely free and you can use right now? Now, today on the channel, I'm gonna use that free tool to try and recreate this amazing graphic from Dan Goldfarb. And I'm gonna see if we can truly replace Photoshop with something that we paid $0 for. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, drop a like on this video and let's jump in. Now, today I'm gonna be using this tool called Photopea. I'm gonna start off by hitting New Project, and I set my width to about 1080, a height of 1350, with a DPI of 300, and my background set to white. I'm then gonna hit Create. And for starters, I'm gonna drag in this Kyler Murray design into my image. Now that I have Photopea open, you can see it's actually pretty identical to the way Photoshop is laid out. Over here on the left-hand side, you have a bunch of tools. Over here on the right-hand side, we have our layers tab. And then there's tons of other options like filters and other things that we can play around with as well. But overall, if you're familiar with the layout and functionality of Photoshop, you should be pretty comfortable with Photopea. I'm gonna start off by hitting Color Fill, and I'm just gonna select a whitish gray color, just like that. Why not just go full white? So I'm gonna drag this behind my layer, and that's looking pretty good. Now, one of the things you'll notice in the design is we have these few kind of swoopy graphics, and those are pretty simple to recreate. I'm gonna start off by creating a new layer, hitting P on my keyboard to bring up my pen tool, and then clicking here. And then I'm gonna slowly follow along this shape and just click and drag to match the overall shape. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna hit Alt. That's a little bit weird, so I can't click outside of the boundaries apparently with the pen tool, so I'm just gonna go to the top corner. And then do the same thing over here, and then click and drag until I get the shape just how I want it. I'm then gonna hit Shape, and just choose black for now. Now that I have that, I'm gonna turn off that layer, and you can see we did a pretty good job of recreating the way that looks. I'm gonna scale it up just to account for the fact that we didn't get it perfectly in this top right corner, but other than that, we're pretty close. I'm then gonna double click here to bring up my color picker and just try and select the shade of gray. Once we have that swoop coming in, I'm gonna do the same thing for this bottom right. So I'm gonna bring up my pen tool again. This time, click in this corner. That looks close enough to me. Clicking on the corners and then hitting Shape once again. I'm then going to hide this. And you can see that time for some reason it created two shapes. So it looks like it took the selection I already had and then created a new selection. That's okay, I'll find a way to work around this. I'm simply gonna go back to my graphic and double click and then choose that shade of gray again. Now we have our top swoop, and it looks like I accidentally dragged that down. Our bottom swoop, and I'm just gonna use a mask to get rid of this top one. It's kind of just in the way, and to be honest, since we're using Photopea, I don't know how to remove that in a way that's different than that. So we essentially have our top swoop and our bottom swoop. And we still have these blue lines. I'm not sure why those blue lines are still there. That's one of the weird things diving into any new program is you're not familiar with the way that operates. I don't know, I'm just gonna leave it as it is. And then I'm gonna add in this red one. That actually will be pretty simple to do as well in Photopea. I'm gonna hit T on my keyboard and then hit 1. From here, I'm just gonna go to my character window, drag this to the very top of my layers, and then simply scale this up. Now, it looks like my slider maxes out at 150. We're obviously gonna need to get bigger than that, so I'm gonna click on Transform Controls and just scale it up that way. Now, there are a ton of fonts built into Photopea already, and I simply can click here, and I'm just gonna look for a font called Enter. It takes a second to load, and then I'm gonna select the bold variation. And overall, I think this looks pretty close to what Dan used in the original design. Now I might play around with using extra bold. From here, I'm gonna choose a color. I'm simply gonna bring up my color picker and choose a shade of red similar to the original graphic. You'll notice that when we look at our original image, there's almost like a sand dune type texture in the background. And that's pretty simple to do. I'm gonna go to pexels.com, which is a great place to find high quality design resources. I'm just gonna type in sand texture and see what comes up. Now you can see here we have tons of different textures, but I think this first one will work pretty well for what we're going for. I'm gonna download that and then drag that directly into Photopea and then rotate it to match appropriately. Scale it up, edit, transform, and then I'm gonna flip that horizontally. Now from here, I'm gonna drag this down below all of our other layers. So I'm gonna start off, I'm gonna add in a levels adjustment. I'm gonna hit Alt or Option on your keyboard and create a clipping mask. And then I'm going to drag this a little bit to the left. From here, I'm then gonna apply a black and white blending mode and drag it above my levels and then play around with this a little bit more. So I'm then gonna go over and pull this image of Travis Kelce. I'm gonna paste it directly into my document. I'm then gonna drag this up to the very top. I'm super curious to see how Photopea handles cutouts. You know, in Photoshop, I could simply go to the object selection tool and then it would do all of the work for me and give me a pretty good cutout. So I'm gonna go over here to this tool right here and choose object selection. Now, I'm pretty sure this is kind of the same process as Photoshop. I'm simply gonna click and drag and highlight over my image and we'll see what results we get. Now, just to show you what that came back with, I'm gonna turn on the layer mask and you can see overall not that good. I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo that and then bring up my quick selection tool. I wanna refine this a little bit, so I'm gonna simply go through and try to add more. Okay, so I'm simply just trying to increase my mask size and you can see things are not working out too well. Maybe try and subtract some and see what kind of results we get. Okay, you can see this does not seem to be working very well at all. I'm then gonna hit Command D and maybe we just start with the quick selection tool from scratch and see if that has any better results. So I'm simply gonna go here and choose quick selection, choose my plus, set my brush size to roughly 31, and then try to go from there. It looks like it selected the entire image, which is not helpful. I'm then gonna choose my minus and try my best to remove the parts that I don't want. This is terrible to work with. I'm gonna be completely frank with you. I've been trying for a couple of minutes now trying to get this narrowed down, and every single time I get close, it just completely freaks out on me and does not work very well. So Photopea on cutouts, I would probably give a 1 out of 10. This is not gonna work very well for you. Now I'm gonna hit Command D. The third option that we have for cutouts is the simplest and longest option, and that's using the pen tool. You can simply do that by pressing P on your keyboard to bring up the tool and zoom in, and from here manually select our entire image. Now this is obviously not ideal, but if you're looking to do a cutout in Photopea and all the other options aren't working for you, honestly, this is better than nothing. Now, I thankfully have already done a cutout, so I'm not gonna do this entire process. I'm then gonna delete this image and just drag in this Travis Kelce cutout that I've already done. Hey everyone, it's me from the future and I need your help. Now you may or may not have heard, but as of August of 2022, federal funding for school lunches has expired. Essentially what that means is if a parent can't pay for a kid's lunch at school, when they go through the line with their friends, they'll have their meal taken away and replaced with a cheaper alternative. Now, here at Sports Design School, we believe that any kid at any school should have a healthy lunch that they can feel good about. And so we're gonna do our part by trying to eliminate as much of that school lunch debt as possible. I've created a GoFundMe down in the link in the description. I would greatly appreciate it if you contribute $5 or $10 or whatever you can. I'll simply start off by reaching out to schools in the metro Atlanta area, because that's where I'm located, and just wipe out as much of that debt as we can. So again, if you could go down to the link in the description and donate, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll follow back up here on the channel with updates. I'm then gonna position it roughly in the center of my image. And if I check on this transform controls box, I can scale it as much as I want to. These things are really annoying. Can I just delete those? No. I don't know You see what I'm talking about though, like the blue lines? Like I'm trying to get rid of those and they don't want to go away. Maybe if I hit pen tool and delete them that way, does that work? Okay, apparently if you open up the pen tool, you can delete your points. So anyone using Photopea and having the same issue, just open up your pen tool and, okay, I'm just not even gonna bother with that anymore. That's just gonna be there and we're gonna have to ignore it for now. And unfortunately in Photopea, there's no camera raw filter, at least in the same vein as Photoshop. I'll show you what I mean. If we go up to filter, camera raw, there's no texture, there's no clarity, there's no playing around with the different colors. We're actually pretty limited to just these simple sliders. So for now, I'm just simply gonna go to filter, sharpen, sharpen, to try and add a little bit more sharpening to my image, simply because I can't add any clarity or other effects. I'm then gonna try and create the shadow for his feet. And so I'm gonna scale down his so I'm gonna scale down this image. I'm going to scale down, okay. Scale down I do not know why this is not working. Maybe if I adjust this. Okay. I'm just gonna leave the image the same size it is. So that was actually super frustrating. Don't know why that was happening. I'm gonna create a new layer and hit B on my keyboard to bring up my brush tool. This is kind of my process for shadows in Photoshop, so I'm gonna try and replicate it in Photopea. I'm gonna bring my size down a little bit to maybe about 126, my hardness all the way down, and I'm gonna turn my flow down to about 8. I'm then gonna pinch this up and simply go to the point where his feet make contact with the ground and add a little bit of a subtle shadow there. From there, I'm gonna scale up slightly bigger, add a little bit of a wider shadow, not as dense that time, and then increase the shadow size and do the same thing a couple more times. I'm gonna turn the opacity down a little bit, and I think that looks okay. So I'm gonna bring up our original image just to compare, and then type in day to kick off. I'm then gonna open up my character window and scale that down a good amount. I'm then just gonna hit edit, transform, and rotate 90 degrees, position it maybe like that. And it looks like I need to kind of configure my one a little bit. And hopefully now my Travis Kelce cutout can be scaled down and positioned the way I want it to. I'm then gonna bring up my text tool, and I'm just gonna simply add some spacing in between my day to kickoff, just so I have more spacing, just like the original design from Dan. I'm then gonna position this up a little bit, turn my tracking down a little bit, and then I'm gonna select this text right here and change the color to white. So you can see we're actually getting pretty close. Now you notice there's a little bit more shadow over here, and I'm gonna go down below my shadow layer, create a new layer, type B on my keyboard, and make this a little bit larger, and just kind of paint roughly a rough shadow around his feet. And then I'm gonna add some noise to kind of duplicate this noisy grain effect here. And so I'm gonna go and hit filter, noise, add noise. We can increase the amount, maybe something like that. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with this filter, noise, add noise. And then we wanna do the same thing with this text. Rasterize, and then add noise. Gonna probably turn down the noise a little bit for the one. Okay, you can see here we're getting pretty close. I need to scale up my Travis Kelce a little bit more. I'm gonna just use my transform controls. I'm then gonna Google Kansas City Chiefs logo. I'm then just gonna take this and hit copy image and then paste that into Photopea. And then position this in the corner like the Cardinals graphic. Now, something about the way that this is oriented feels a little bit off to me. I feel like it's probably because that's what it is. I was zoomed in on my canvas. There's some small text up here in the corner. I'm just gonna type in 2022 season like that. Scale my text down a good amount. Now another effect I want to add is a curves adjustment on top of my Travis Kelce layer. Simply just wanting to bring up the shadows a little bit and then crunch down these midtones. Okay, so you can see we're pretty close. The only things that we haven't done so far are this swoop, this signature detail, and this logo right here. That logo, super easy to do. Just drag it into Photopea, similar to what we did with this Cardinals logo. And then this signature, we would just look for a Travis Kelce signature on Google, try to drag it in and add a color overlay to get that effect. Now I'm gonna try and group all of these layers together, hit Command G. I want to duplicate that layer just so I have a backup just in case. And then I'm gonna hit Layer, Merge Layers. And what that will do is take all of our layers and compress them into one single image. I'm then gonna hit Command A to select just the bounding box of my artboard, and then hit Command J so that we only have this part of the image selected. I'm then from here gonna hit Filter, Noise, and at this point add noise on top of the entire image. So maybe something super subtle like 5%. So here you can see we have the before version. This is the design created by Dan Goldfarb. And this is the design that we put together in the free Photoshop alternative called Photopea. Now let me know down in the comments if you would potentially replace Photoshop with Photopea. Again, Photoshop is like $55 a month if you have the all apps plan, versus Photopea is completely free. So I think it's a great tool for what it is. I think overall, if I had to go through and rate all of the different elements of Photopea, I'd say usability probably about a 3.5 stars. And I'll go into that a little bit more. The cutout process is terrible. Photoshop just makes it so easy. You drag in an image, you hit object selection, and it does all of the work for you. In Photopea, it's a little bit like pulling teeth. I mean, it truly is super difficult. I guess you could use the pen tool, so maybe I'd rate it maybe 1.5 stars in terms of cutouts in Photopea. So I think that's okay. The functionality is there and you can do all the same things that you would do in Photoshop. The difference is it can be a little bit janky sometimes, and that's to be expected. It's a completely free tool, so I'm definitely not expecting perfection, but there are some moments you'll have for sure that kind of make you a little bit frustrated when going through the design process, which can be a little bit discouraging. As far as text goes, I'd actually give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I think you have pretty much every single thing that you would have in Photoshop as far as text customization. You can even go to Window, Character, and that'll bring up all these different text tools, and you have the option of importing your own fonts if you want to. So if I hit Load Font here, I can then just select a font file, and then within Photopea, I'm able to use whatever font I want to. As far as brushes go, I'd probably also give that a 4.5 out of 5 stars, or maybe even 5 stars. I found the brush tool to be pretty similar to the overall setup in Photoshop. Here in this window, you have a few different options, but if you go up to Window and then Brush, you have the ability to customize your brush even more. Also, just like the fonts, you have the ability to go here on this dropdown and load in your own brush files. So you're not limited to the pre-installed brushes that they have within Photopea. And then the different adjustment layers. I think the adjustment layers were helpful and pretty much function the exact same as Photoshop. The one thing that I really missed, I will say this, was the camera raw filter functionality from Photoshop. There's a lot that I use that for, whether it be playing around with highlights and shadows or even just adding simple clarity to my layers. And so not having that was a little bit frustrating for me. But overall, I'd say if you are a person that's looking to get into Photoshop, maybe you don't want to spend $55 a month and get the full version, and you are looking for something to just get in and get familiar with the program, I would say this is a great tool to get you started. If you want to see more videos on Photopea in the future, let me know down in the comments. I'd be curious to see what kind of feedback there is to a video like this. Now, if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like if you haven't already, subscribe if you aren't, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.